and that is the Hawks in New York against the Knicks as Atlanta beat the Knicks 107-106 to tie the series 1-1 in game 2. And it's completely different from when we first started this podcast, or even back to the Shaun and Vaughn days when Toddy's boy, Trae Young, who constantly makes everyone shiver, he was the villain and he was torching everyone and everything in Madison Square Garden, and he embraced the villain role. And now Trae Young is gone, and a player that was acquired in the trade that sent him to DC, none other than Mr. CJ McCollum, has basically been cast as the villain for his role that he played in game 2, where he was constantly cooking Jalen Brunson, and they were targeting Jalen Brunson. They were putting him on an island. And I don't like seeing this happen to Jalen Brunson. He's a close personal friend of mine. For the audio-only listeners, I'm totally joking. I just had to have an excuse to put a selfie of Jalen Brunson and I on the screen from 2021 during COVID when I saw him walking around with his lady in Doko. And that was before Jalen Brunson really blew up into the player that he is today. Nevertheless, Atlanta ties the series 1-1. Toddy, I'm tossing this one right back to you because you've kind of been a Hawks fan and truther throughout the years due to your love for Trae Young. I remember you mimicking Shaq with the but now the new look Hawks have tied the series with New York. What was your reaction to the game 2 win, and also how you feel about the rest of this series?
I thought I picked the Hawks to win the series. I don't think anybody had CJ McCollum going for 32 on their bingo card. Didn't really see too much from Jalen Johnson, who I think a lot of people believe that is the Hawks' best player. You thought you would see a little bit more from Nickeil Alexander-Walker based off of his regular season performance. Jonathan Kuminga, I thought, is going to. I think he's the X factor in this whole entire series. Just him being able to give that bench scoring that Hawks team's ever so desperately needed. Is going to be key for them. As far as the Knicks go, you already know Jalen Brunson is going to get his shots up. He's going to probably, I predicted he probably was going to average about 30 points this entire series. I mean, it's nothing new for him. We're accustomed to seeing Brunson score at a high rate in the playoffs when it's his time to shine. Um, I thought the Hawks had the right game plan. Just try and go at Cat early, get him in foul trouble, kind of disrupt their game plan. I just think the Knicks kind of let it slip away a little bit. Obviously, the Hawks came back from 26 at one point. Knicks got a little bit stagnant offensively. Let the Hawks kind of climb back in it slowly, and I just think CJ McCollum just he saw a lane and he saw red, and the rest was history. I thought he had a very clutch three, or was it was step back corner? Yeah, I think it was corner three that he had late in the game that kind of ended up uplifting them to a victory. Obviously, I thought it was a very close. I think this game did hit the under. It for sure hit the under in this game. This is going to be a very tight series just based off of the way that the Hawks play. They want to run and gun. They want to get up and down. The Knicks are the complete opposite, wanting to slow the pace down. Brunson is able to get in the half court setting and score off of the pick and roll. And I think those two styles of play are going to collide, and one's going to have to give. I think the Hawks just have a little bit more offensively, and I know it's weird to say it with OG Anunoby, with Mikal Bridges, with Karl Anthony Towns, and obviously Jalen Brunson. I just think as far as the season has went for the New York Knicks, their offense gets a little bit stagnant now. I don't know if that's just the style of play that Mike Brown brings to what their skill set is. That could play a role. Um, and I just think this Knicks team has to figure out a way to not let Jalen Brunson get in his own way? Because I just think the way that he plays, it could disrupt how the Knicks offense can flow because he's going to. I think when Jalen Brunson gets on, he's going to be a ball stopper, and everyone's kind of just watching him work. He's going to score, so that minimizes their movement offensively. So that might affect the flow of the offense that Mike Brown wants to run versus what Jalen Brunson, style of play is. And I think that's going to come to a stalemate, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get that squared away because the Knicks are going to need a little bit more. Now, I understand Jalen Brunson's probably averaging 30 points as we speak in the series. They're just going to need a little bit more from Karl Anthony Towns, a little bit more. OG Anunoby, God's sake, Mikal Bridges, where are you?
Yeah, so Keith, earlier we were talking about De'Aaron Fox needing to show up. Obviously, for Mike Brown, and we're sticking with the Sacramento connection here, but Mike Brown isn't out there on the court, but he is the one calling the plays and leading the charge in the huddle. And so a lot of the blame's getting placed on Mike Brown here. Keith, do you believe that that blame is well deserved, or are you pointing the finger elsewhere? And just how are you feeling about this series overall?
It's one of those series, in my opinion, where one team has all the pressure to win for obvious reasons, and the other team is playing with house money. The Knicks can tell you anything they want and say it's just another game. The Knicks have aspirations of getting to the NBA Finals. That is what they see. That is what the fans want to see. That's what that city wants to see. The Knicks have so much pressure to get to the finals after last year. The Hawks are just happy to be here. Hawks did not see on the bingo card a 6 seed when they traded Trae Young. They didn't see any of that. They're just happy to be here. And what you're seeing develop in this series is that the Knicks have succumbed to the pressure. The Knicks buckled under that pressure in game 2. And one of the reasons they have pressure is because they were criticized in the offseason for letting Tibbs walk out the door and replacing him with Mike Brown. And I love Mike Brown. Light the beam. Love it. Loved everything he did for Sacramento. But Mike Brown has a proven track record of botching and blowing up in late game situations and not hitting the right buttons. That's half the reason he's out of Sacramento, right? So again, what you saw in game 2 was the fact that, okay, you can make the argument. Knicks might have the best player in the series in Jalen Brunson. I get to that in a minute. But you can't tell me they have the best coach. Quinn Snyder's the best coach in this series by leaps and bounds, especially in the late game. And what did Quinn Snyder do? He said, I have the ultimate recipe to get this thing home. When it got to 6, I said, now we've got a problem. Because what happened last year to the Knicks? Choked in late game situations against Indiana in those first 2 games in the Garden. What happened in game 2 is the same thing that's been happening all year to the Knicks. Up big, take their foot off the gas pedal, and then what do, Shaun? What do, Toddy? They do what they did last year. They go to what works. They go to Jalen Brunson to bail them out, save us, Jalen, with your late game heroics. And again, sometimes it works. Majority of the time last year it worked. But you saw Atlanta had the right recipe. When he gets past half court, we're doubling him at the top of the three-point line. We're going to force him with that height disadvantage to make a pass. And when he does, like they did in that final sequence that sealed it, Jalen Johnson or whoever, I think it's Alexander Walker, picks the ball off. Jalen Johnson the other way, dunk, 4-point game, game's over. And what I love about this series is that CJ McCollum, you can make an argument, one of the more underrated guards of this decade. And CJ has had his faults in certain situations. But the one thing about CJ McCollum that he's always hung his hat on, Portland especially, New Orleans, you saw it in ebbs and flows because it's the Pelicans and they weren't really relevant. When CJ McCollum gets hot, nothing you can do. because he's going to light it up. And you mentioned it, Shaun. They specifically said, Jalen Brunson, you're not going to double. You're going to play this thing one-on-one. All right, we like our chances. And I like what Toddy said. Because Kuminga, I don't think they have anybody that can guard Kuminga one-on-one. The same way the Kings didn't when they played him in Golden State. He can get to the hole anytime he wants. He's athletic. He's great with the second chance opportunities on the rebounds. I got to be honest with you. The Knicks better hope this doesn't get to a game 6 or a game 7 because all the pressure is on the Knicks. The longer this series goes, the more it favors Atlanta. Atlanta, again, playing with house money. They're not expected to win. Everyone's looking at the Knicks and Celtics already. They got that penciled in on the bracket. Okay, what's going to happen? No, because the longer this thing goes, the more that pressure is going to squeeze the Knicks and the fan base. Why aren't we winning already? We should have this thing in the bag. And so Knicks better win game 3. Knicks better win game 3 or at least game 4 and get out of there with a 2-2 slide. Because, again, I hearken back to the whole Spurs thing. If the Knicks come back to the Garden down 3-1 and they win game 5 and got to go to Atlanta to win a must-win game 6, I'm not saying the Hawks are going to win this series. But one game to get to the second round, I'd take my chances if I was an Atlanta Hawks fan. But, again, you got one team clearly playing with all the pressure in the world. Another team just happy to be there. And, hey, they've opened the door. Now we got to see what the Hawks can do. But the door is open, Atlanta. Magic City's going to be on one. Get those wings ready, baby. Because Lemon Pepper Lou's coming. If the Hawks could somehow pull this off, strip clubs are going to be undefeated. It'll be the time of their lives out there in the ATL. God bless them.
Yeah, the one thing that I'll add on to this series, just to put a bow on it, is we talked about CJ McCollum getting hot and how it's hard to stop him when he is in that mindset and he's just locked in on that level. Sacramento Kings fans know that all too well because the Kings told CJ McCollum that they were going to draft him, and then they proceeded not to draft him. So he responded by torching the Sacramento Kings every single time that he plays them, and he consistently drops 30 on the Kings' head. So we in Sacramento know all too well what it's like when CJ McCollum is on one, and now everyone in New York is quickly learning that. As we get to this last series here on episode 188 of Stats Over Politics, Shaun Holko alongside Keith Joganatis and Jaevon Toddy. For the sake of time, we're chopping the awards segment at the end. We'll talk about all the awards when they all have been released rather than just the top 3.